very much.
Yay. Thank you all for being here. We will do introductions again around the room.
Jeff Hanley.
Joanne O'Brien.
Holly Rogers.
Linda Caputo.
Oh, Becky Plus.
Tony Pete.
Megan Carlson.
Sean Coven.
Michelle Tucker.
Administrative staff, please.
Pat Hopkins, Superintendent.
Andrea Dish, Business Manager.
Dave Dostey, Facilities Director.
Sarah Volovic, Director of Special Services.
Nate Stubbard, Athletic Director.
Katie Gould, Principal at Helen Thompson School. Lauren Arnold, Principal at Gardner High School.
Sarah Sims, Principal at Gardner Regional Middle School. It's been a long day.
Tiffany Cotton, Principal at Pittston Randolph Consolidated School.
Karen Moody, Principal of Laura Richards School.
Terry McGuire, Director of Technology.
And former school board member who is now on city council. Hi, Mark. Thank you for being here. All right.
And apologies for starting late.
Apologies for starting late. It's not my fault, Kate.
It's okay.
Not today. All right, I'm going to turn it over to someone who understands the numbers so intricately, and that would be Pat and/or Andrea to guide us
Are
through
you
this
ready?
next
Do you want
part.
to start by identifying the paperwork that you've distributed?
Sure.
So first and foremost, I have shared the Google Doc with the board members as well as the administrators, so they now have view privileges. In the paperwork that you have that I'm going to share on the screen, is that what you want me to do, is go through what is in the packets?
Yeah, kind of explain what's here and then whichever one you're going to discuss in greater detail, you can put that on the screen.
Sure. So
If you've got too much room, you just push me over. Gently.
Gently.
Gently flail.
Soft.
Soft.
So the first document that you see in front of you is our budget cuts from our last meeting. There are a lot of things that are still in progress that we have yet to hone in on. So the cuts, while they appear to be minimal, there are a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes. So since our last meeting, the high school has been busy. They cut $670 from instructional supplies from Article 1. Special education, Sarah and I met and we had discussions about special purpose private school placements. Originally in the budget, there were 19 special purpose private school placements, totaling about 1.4 million in the budget. After conversation, Sarah and I removed 4. And one of the other placements, while we didn't remove it from the budget, I offset the expenditure with revenue from SAC, which is state agency client. So it's a student who is a non-resident who is placed here by the state. Now, Sarah and I talked a lot about these placements. There's a lot of risk, but we felt that we could make these 4 cuts, knowing that we have some money in the reserve account. So those cuts total $239,000. We also, looking at her budget again, after we decreased seed money, the BCBA portion of seed money at last meeting, Sarah and I discussed increasing the BCBA contracted services. Money's in the budget for her to contract with somebody for BCBA services. And we figured it would be a good time to do that since it'll just offset the decrease to the out-of-district placements. The next expenditure article is other instruction, which includes extracurricular and co-curricular. There were cuts that the high school offered in the amount of almost $17,000. Article 5, student and staff support. I needed to make an update to a staff member's health insurance in the budget before the budget was finalized, and that resulted in an actual increase of about $9,200. There are no cuts in Article 6, system administration, no cuts in Article 7, school administration. The next Article 8, transportation, is tied to the conversation that I had with Sarah regarding special private school placements. There's money in the budget for transportation of those students. Removing those 4 students, I was also able to remove almost $50,000 in special purpose private school transportation from the transportation budget. There were no cuts to facilities this go round. Actually, there are no other cuts to the remaining expenditure articles. So since last week, we were able to cut a total of $262,350.03. So, the next item or the next piece of paper that you have in front of you is Pat asked for a way to compare from one meeting to the next. So you have in front of you a document that looks similar to the document that I presented last time, except I labeled the columns better. So when Molly asked a question, I knew what I actually did for math. So they are labeled better, and you can also see the cuts that we made this week. So if you look
Molly.
at, yeah, Molly always asks good questions.
Yes.
So if you see at the bottom, you'll see the version cuts are 262,000, 0.81%. The total cuts between last go round and this go round is about 1.3 million. The next item that you see should be very familiar. It's our updated expenditure articles. Again, we put them by expenditure article because the state requires us to do so when we go out to referendum. So it just makes sense to continue to practice. And that is where all of the expenditure articles currently stand. So overall, we are still up 1.358 201.02 cents, or 4.19%. That's the increase to the budget. On the back side of that document, for those who are holding the paper, you see the updated worksheet. There's a few things that I updated other than the budget. So you'll see in the top left-hand corner where I have listed miscellaneous revenue highlighted in a periwinkle. You'll see where it says state agency client tuition. So I've changed that figure since our last discussion, and that's per that SAC student that I just spoke about. I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm not changing the pages. So that is the 150,000 is updated from I want to say 70,000 prior, 80,000. Thank you. From our previous worksheet to reflect the revenue that we anticipate to see for that student from the state. The bottom line now to the towns, or to the 4 municipalities rather, is 1.5 million, or 11.38%. The next document is part of our next conversation. A few things that I want to share with you. At last meeting, we discussed federal expenditures. We received a communication this week from MSA, Maine School Superintendents Association, that basically advised districts that our federal grant monies only appear to be secure through September 2025. And that while they anticipate us having grant monies, those allocations have been yet to be made. And we have yet to have conversations as an administrative team about that. This is relatively new information for us. So we have not had time to flesh out what that would look like. But for those of you who were at the meeting, or were at finance the last time we met, I shared a document that outlined all of our federal grant money. So I guess we don't know what that means, but we will be having further conversations. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I mean, that date is kind of rolling. That was new for me. I had heard that it was pretty secure for next year because we already had the money, so that is.
Meaning it's
clearly
already
not
been
the case.
appropriated.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll have to keep monitoring it and see what happens, and the administrative team will have to have a conversation.
Mhm.
Because none of that was 1.3 million, none of that is in our budget.
Nope, not.
So those are our title programs, professional development, class size reduction.
Tina Tech ones.
Oh, right, for special education.
And I think I shared with you at our last meeting how on that federal document, how we use all of our title monies, and most of it is personnel. Yep. So any questions about anything so far? So the next conversation, are we ready to move on, Becky, or I'm just kind of humming us along, or?
I think so. I do have in the back of my mind, and I don't expect you to answer it right this minute, but I expect that we're gonna need to get below double digits into single digits. And so I'm kind of wondering what 7% would look like, between 5% and 7% would look like for communities as an increase. 11 is too high, and I don't expect you to know right now off the top of your head.
I know that Tony had asked me to look at, usually I provide a document, the expected increase to taxpayers. And typically I don't provide that document until we are closer. I have never started, like I have never provided that document when we roll out the budget, just because I would honestly frighten everyone. I took a glance at what it would look like. I do know that where we are now would be an increase of about 1.5 mils to some of our towns. And we can further discuss that as we hone down the budget, what that would look like. Some of our communities, their mill rate is 25, while other communities have a mill rate of 10, 11. So, it's
a huge difference.
Yep.
It's a huge difference.
And when you see the document that I see, it's really drastic. So, yep. Anyway.
So, I mean, behind the scenes, as Andrea said, behind the scenes, we're still working on ways in which this budget can be further reduced. Having conversations about what that could potentially look like. So I would anticipate by next meeting, we will be ready to share more of those, keeping in mind already that we've already removed 2 existing kindergarten positions, 2 grade 2 position we've removed, social worker position we've removed. Something
Bus
else.
driver, we
We've
cut a
removed a bus driver.
position.
So those are all positions that are currently in the budget, but we're kind of responding to enrollment, right? And so we're trying to make some reductions there. So we continue to do that work. And so the budget that you see tonight is not the proposed budget or where it stands next week. I fully anticipate that there will be some additional reductions. How low can we get that? I don't know the answer, Becky. I mean, that is frightening. But keep in mind, you've had labor negotiations So we've had to increase some salaries. We are still waiting for
the
health insurance.
Correct.
So again, the notification that we received, what was that, 3 weeks ago now? They told us it could be as high as 17%. We have been, we are anticipating to learn what the highest percentage will be on this Friday.
Right.
So by next meeting, we should know what the cap will be. We won't yet know what our rate will be,
Where we fit in.
but it will know at least what the cap is. We currently have, as you've said before, 10% in the budget.
Mhm.
Our medical expense ratio has been favorable. So we are hoping that we will be able to stay within that 10% or slightly less. But based on what we heard from our insurance, from Anthem, I don't anticipate the 2% or the 0% that we've seen the last couple of years. That's just not going to happen. Within a couple weeks, we should know whether there are any reductions that can be realized as a result of the health insurance.
And do we know yet what each percentage point above 10% costs?
I didn't it's probably around $30,000. I didn't calculate. That's
Yeah.
typically where it stands.
Okay.
At this point, I think best case scenario is not having to add to the budget.
Mhm.
And these are contractual obligations.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And as a reminder, we talk about this during negotiations. Health insurance is a big ticket item.
Mhm.
But when we look around to the other districts, we are certainly paying less for health insurance than a lot of our neighbors. While most of us pay 100% for single, we are very low at 70% dependent coverage. If you look around, it's hard to find somebody at 70%. You usually see 80, 85, 90. I've even seen 95. So I know the number is horrifying to look at, but, compared to everyone around us, this district is paying less for health insurance than our neighbors.
Thank you. Yes, Andrea, we can, unless anyone has questions, let's move along.
So the next conversation is a conversation that we have been having for the last few years. So when we're faced with such a large gap, it's easy for people to suggest that we use unallocated fund balance to fix our problem. So I'm just going to go over unallocated fund balance with you. I'm going to switch over to a spreadsheet so that you can see what happens. Or actually, I'll go through this first and then I'll switch over. So the top half of this document is our unallocated fund balance. These are audited balances dating back to 2015 and our most recent audited financial statement for the year ending June 30th, 2024. And you can see where it looks like we have a lot of fund balance left. So we have, if you look at the document, there's $7,962,028, $7,962,28 in audited fund balance at the end of June 30th, 2024. It's broken down on the side. 7.2 million is in general fund and the 700,000 that we talk about that's in the special ed reserve account. The figure that you see below is the average 5-year fund balance change. So this column right here is the amount that fund balance has changed from year to year. And what you'll notice is starting in 2020 around COVID, we started increasing fund balance very quickly. The first year was COVID, and then we've really struggled filling a lot of our positions. So you see that we've added to fund balance. Now, down below is how we are using fund balance. So last year, Whether you realize it or not, in addition to the 1.3 million in fund balance that Oops. Terry, my internet, oh, there it is unstable. It's all right. So, where was I?
Sorry.
No.
You'll notice last year from the bottom.
So last year, in order to close our funding gap, we used the 700,000 in special ed reserve. So basically you're using over $2 million of unallocated fund balance to close your gap, okay? So now if we use less than the $2 million, now there's another gap that's created that we have to close. So what you'll see below is the fund balance as of June 30th of 7.9 million. We have already allocated of that 7.9 million, you've already allocated 2 million to this year's budget, to the budget that we are currently in. So that leaves us with 5.9 million. And now we're looking at committing another 2,025,000 for the 2026 budget. So below that, you can see where you'll see where I take that amount out of every year. And then I've put in the average, the 5-year average of what's going into our fund balance. What I will say is I think that average that we're putting into fund balance is artificially high. I think that once we start funding these positions, our fund balance, the change to fund balance will start to decrease. Even if we are looking at increasing fund balance by the 820,000 every year, you will see that we run out of fund balance in FY29. This isn't even including any decreases in the change to fund balance. So any year that we have less than 800,000, we will run out of fund balance sooner than FY29, depending upon what the change to fund balance is. You know, fund balance is it's a touchy thing. And you know, there are a lot of things that I talk about. In years past, the state has done curtailments in the middle of the year during difficult budget years. And what a curtailment is that they have said, well, they've allocated your subsidy in the middle of the year, they will tell you that is not what we're getting. We are cutting all districts by a percentage. So we're then forced to either fund or fill the gap, or we're forced to cut during the year. I think it's important that we continue to have fund balance in our back pocket. In fact, this is less fund balance that I would like, but I think it strikes a balance between being able to fund our budgets without gutting everything. And, you know, we've had conversations about our budget this year. There's nothing in our budget. There are no new positions with the exception of the half-time position. It is just the day-to-day cost of doing business in the district. There is nothing exceptional in our budget this year.
What creates the change, the $800,000? What generates that change?
The change, that 820,000, all that is I took the last 5 years and I averaged the fund balance. And what I just said is the reason that we have so much fund balance, or at the end of last year, is we had several special ed positions that we did not
So
fill.
it's just not spending what's allocated. That's
We
all.
have struggled to fill staff. Do you wanna?
No, it's true. We have had a lot of unfilled positions that we could not employ staff members. There are positions that are necessary. We had to get creative.
Is that the only thing that generates that?
No.
Other functions?
Usually a lot of the fund balance will come from Gabe's budget. So this year, I'm noticing that when we talked last year, there were conversations, or when we were in budget last year, there were conversations about natural gas being explosive and about the way that, you know, the increases that they were asking for from the PUC. We budgeted to protect ourselves against it. It didn't happen as quite, so there's money left in natural gas, if it's not a harsh winter. We sometimes have money left in our electricity accounts. It varies, but most of it is typically in Gabe's budget. And now that it's coming from special ed, it's
All multitude of sources. that could-
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it could be also be that, we will budget for new staff members and we will budget middle of the road and we'll budget for certain health insurance. And then when we hire new staff, they may be below what we budgeted, they may have different health insurance, so there may be some savings in that realm.
In other words, you don't know what you got until you got it.
Correct, correct.
So we are lucky. I say there isn't as much fund balance as I would like. And just to be clear, fund balance can only be used to further buy down the budget. I can't say, or we can't say, we have spent all the money in our budget, but I know that we have 7.9 million in fund balance, so I'm gonna go out and buy, I don't know, a new truck for Gabe. That fund balance cannot be touched. We are only allowed to touch what the voters authorized to touch. I cannot go outside of the amount that they've approved and spend any more than that other than federal grants and special ed and adult ed. And those fund balances, adult ed has their own unallocated fund balance. The school lunch program has their own that we cannot touch because a lot of it comes from federal money. So there is no, unlike cities and towns, their fund balances, they are able to do what they want with it. That is not, we live by different state statutes. It is not the same. So the fund balance we use is to buy down the amounts that we are passing along to locals, and that is the only use of it. Questions? I know this is a lot. I was going to say something else and that thought has gone. I was going to show you what happened, but I think if the numbers changed, like if we started losing the increase from year to year, how fast we would be running out of fund balance. I think you understand the concept. There's no need for me to play with a spreadsheet, but I do not recommend using any more than the 2 million in fund balance that we are currently using. I think we may find ourselves in a pickle if, for instance, if Sarah has a lot of, or special ed has a lot of out-of-district placements and we're looking to that 700,000 to pay for all of those, it's going to be hard to make that up next year if we expend all of it. And then in addition to finding monies to fund next year's budget, we're also trying to fill that $700,000 hole that we've created for ourselves. So it's a fine art. And if you read the newspapers, you'll find school districts who've found themselves in trouble not having the fund balance that they thought they had. We are extremely fortunate. Some of these towns are budgeting next year's budget, trying to guess how much fund balance that they will have at the end of the current year to apply it to next year's budget. We are lucky. We have 2 years of fund balance. So we know when I use this, that when we book it, that I actually have it. I can't imagine trying to guess how much money now that I'm going to have remaining at the end of the year to try to plug a hole. And then if you don't have what you think you had, then you've created another hole that needs to be filled or cuts that need to be made in the new budget year. So we're fortunate in a lot of ways. But anyway.
So our only option is you've got to make some more cuts. We're gonna have to do some more very sharp pencils. There's no other way to do this.
We are absolutely looking, as I said, we're looking deeper. We're looking at class sizes. We're looking at services that we're providing. Yes, next meeting when we return, there will be more on the table. We just need a little more time to do that analysis and to be thoughtful about the process. But yes, there will be more reductions.
I think with seeing what's going on with our budget and seeing what's going on with state subsidy, I think it gives us more reason to look to consolidation, finding ways of reducing our expenditures. I mean, we are maintaining 6 buildings and our enrollment is dropping.
And as you said, there is not fluff here. You know, we are pretty bare to the bones. And so if we're looking at making these reductions, we're talking staffing positions. That's where you're going to get the money, or you're looking at facilities. And that means not maintaining your buildings. And that can be more costly down the road if you don't maintain your buildings now. But those are certainly all the things that we're looking at.
Well, I mean, I look at the communities that we all live in, you know, and the, we all know what a pound of butter costs and what it used to cost, and every other thing that everyone purchases. And, you know, towns are starting to take a more rigid view on their budgets. I mean, Pittston voted down quite a bit of money last week. They just said, no, we're not gonna spend it. So the public opinion is that we gotta tighten up this. We
No.
can't keep doing this
Yep.
11% increase
Part
every
of-
year.
The problem is the funding formula and the tie it has to valuation. You know, we all talk about valuation on in a spreadsheet does not equate to valuation or increase in anyone's pocket. And as we've discussed, the valuation for our 4 communities, it went up 16%, I think it is. It's either 16 or 17. You know, I don't know about you, but I've never received a 16% increase in my wages. I mean, that just doesn't happen. It's untenable. In this community, there isn't a lot of commercial real estate. It's all pretty much homeowners,
Yeah.
which makes the burden really difficult. I completely understand. But when I say there is nothing in our budget, there is nothing in our budget. So
I just want to clarify, because we had the form last week that we'd already made some adjustments, some cuts to positions based on how the class sizes are moving, right? How the enrollment is moving, which seems, I'm concerned because I want our highly qualified people here. And that is probably the smartest way to make those adjustments to track so that we're in compliance with policy. So we have,
Right.
you know, the right number of students with the right number of teachers. So we are making those cuts already, these like pretty serious, I think, cuts, and I recognize, right, 11% is pretty steep. I think we did get it under 10% last year. I think we got to single digits last year, right? And right, the cost of butter keeps going up, right? It's not a nickel, sorry to advertise, right? But it's not a nickel anymore. Things keep moving. But I just want to recognize that this work is being done, and I appreciate the spreadsheets that we do get that show where we're tracking this.
When you're talking about consolidation, were you talking about consolidation of buildings?
Yeah, there are different ways of consolidating. Certainly, we've discussed consolidating buildings in the past, and by doing that, you could reduce some of your redundant services, right? I mean, we know that when we look at administration, for example, that we have administrators in all of our buildings, and it is necessary for that. But if you had fewer buildings, then you wouldn't need as many administrators. You wouldn't need as many educators for all of these positions, right? So if we have a building with 30, just throw out the number, with 30 students, well, you need 2 teachers. Well, those class sizes are 15. Right? And you could probably have a class size of 20. So if you were to have one building, you could better spread those students out, and therefore you would probably need fewer instructors, food service, custodial services, all of those things. There could easily be some savings.
I was gonna say, if something like that were to happen, can you basically cannibalize the building that you're not using to repair other buildings?
Well, there were lots of things that would have to be discussed by the board, and whatever you do has to be approved by the community, right? So you as a board just can't say, this is what we want to do, X, Y, Z. You know, like when Randolph School was closed, TC Hamlin, the community had to support that. So you have to do the work behind the scenes and basically explain to the community why you believe it's the appropriate approach and why it's in the best interest of students, best interest of the community. But ultimately, it is up to the community to make the decision as to whether a school is closed. Now, there are nuances to that. There can be cost to a community if they choose to keep a school open. They may have to pay the additional cost to keep that open. Should the school board elect to close it? So yeah, there are many, many layers. Of course, the first step that we've all discussed is waiting for the construction list to be released in June. And should the high school and any of our elementary schools, I think we're really looking at Pitts and Randolph, for example, if either of those were elevated high enough to receive funding, then that opens the door for some of these conversations to be had.
When we closed TC Hamlin, I think it went to vote, I want to say 4 times before we actually were able to close.
4 different years.
We tried, I believe, on 4 different, before it finally went through. I think when we finally closed, how many students were left in that?
Yeah, I want to say there were like 47 students.
But we have been going over there for probably 12 years before it closed to talk about closing it because that enrollment continued to decline.
And there's a lot of state statutes that oversee closing a building, and you know, we just like you can't keep a building open and have a special ed program in it. You need to have K-12 instruction in it. So I mean, there are a lot of things that we thought we might be able to do, but the statute doesn't allow for. So our hands were pretty tied as far as what we could use that building for. Any other questions?
Just one more. I mean, if, God forbid, the budget is voted down, is then talking about something like this on the table?
Sound like we can do it.
This is on the table now for you to talk about it.
Okay.
If the budget is voted down, you have to go through the process again and put another budget out to the voters. But deciding whether to close a school or not is a long process. It doesn't happen simply, easily. Now, as you know, an administrative team, there's talk about, are there alternative ways in which we can structure the school so that it could be cost savings? I mean, those creative conversations have happened as well. Trying to come up with a complete structure change within a month to have that go into place at the beginning of the school year and to make it work with the budget is not necessarily something that we can do, because oftentimes there's construction that has to happen, right? You have to rework a particular building to make a particular grade fit in there maybe. But the fact that they're being creative and trying to come up with some ideas, I share it with you because it demonstrates that they see it, they know, and they're trying to think outside the box and not just look at the same thing that we've been doing and looking at programs and how do we dice our programs to find a little bit more money. No one really wants to do that because it just reduces the number of opportunities for our students, right? And we don't want to do that. So.
Moving on. Okay. The back page of this is just a page out of the, when the audit was done, I shared the financials with you, and I just pulled a page out of it because I wanted you to see where I pulled the fund balance from. So if you look at page 14 from the financials that you received, I would say in January, that will tie, this figure ties to the figure that I was just discussing. So that's what that page is. The next set of documents is actually going to be the easiest of all of our budgets, and it's the school nutrition budget. This is a separate budget, separate from the general budget. It's the easiest budget that I do. So what you will see is, you have in front of you the summary budget. Overall, this budget is up, it is up 5.88% or $83,000. The next page that you see is the revenue. So there are no local contributions that fund food service. It's basically all funded by the state and the feds. So the next, after page 9, you will see a revenue figure, and you will see how where the revenue comes from. Like I said, most of it comes from federal and state sources. However, you're using $158,000 of school nutrition fund balance, and they have that. So let's see, trying to figure out where to start this conversation. So prior to the state making sure that all of the students are fed, the district used to have to budget as part of its general budget monies to go to food service to basically close the funding gap. This program was not funded in its entirety between the state and the feds. So a good thing about this is that while the state is paying, making sure every student receives a lunch and a breakfast, we are not having to spend general funds. However, should that go away, I have no doubt that if it should go away, we will need to start budgeting local funds again to close that funding gap. So we are a winner in a lot of ways from the state's decision to feed students. As a result, our fund balance in school nutrition has grown. The last page that you see is, I'm trying to follow along with you on the screen, is the current or the fund balance for school nutrition at the end of last fiscal year. So at the end of June 30th, 2024, the school nutrition fund balance had $298,296. And as I said earlier, there are federal monies. We cannot use it to fund the general budget. So we can't even have that discussion. But I am using, or we are using 158,000 of it to close the funding gap for next year of the fund balance. There's really nothing extraordinary in this budget other than food and labor. Linda did ask for 2 pieces of equipment. They total less than 25,000 total. She has asked for an oven and a dishwasher. And as I said, they are less than together 25,000. I would be happy to discuss the school nutrition budget. It's basically broken out into office of the director. And then there's a section for lunch, and then there's a section for breakfast. And then there's a section for a la carte. Those are foods that kids buy on the side. That is part of either a breakfast or a lunch meal. So kids can buy, Lauren, I've been out of the lunch thing for a while. What kinds of food do you serve on the a la carte?
On the a la carte, we have sandwiches, pizza, chicken type sandwiches, salads.
And all of those funds are tracked separately from the state, and we're also reimbursed through separate funding streams for them. Again, there's nothing exceptional here. Basically, the way that the budget works is I look at to see what we've spent to date based on the number of days, and then I multiply it out based on the number of total days in the school year, and then I look to see how things are trending. And that's basically how the nutrition budget, the nutrition staff, like our regular staff, it's position-based, so everybody's in a position. They get moved from a step to step every year. There's a salary increases according to the collective bargaining agreement. The same thing that goes for health and dental insurance. There's nothing really exceptional to talk about, but if you have questions, I would be happy to address them.
I just have one question. So I see the prices going up each year. Is that just with inflation? Because I do know that our number of students is going down overall.
Yep.
So
So it's based on the kids who are eating. Some kids eat, some kids don't. Some kids will get a free meal and then buy another meal on their own. This is based on our current expenditures. I did not inflate it other than what we're seeing for our current prices. I mean, I've tried to.
I'm just asking for a broad stroke. I'm not asking for anything.
Yep, that is basically I basically look at our trends and I budget based on what I see our current trends.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. That is all I have to say about lunch unless somebody has additional questions. What I was hoping is that we would not have to visit the lunch budget again unless there was, I can't honestly think of a reason, and I was hoping that
I would make a motion to approve
Thank you.
the nutrition budget for this year.
Thank
or
you,
for
Megan.
next year.
You read my mind.
Yes.
Second.
Are you on? finance?
Oh, I'm so sorry, I am not.
So this would be a
I'll-
finance committee
second
member,
that, yeah.
Sean. All those in favor, finance committee members? Okay. Andrea, thank you for your forecasting capabilities.
Yeah. For our next meeting, we are going to look at the additional cuts.
Okay.
I am hoping that I have the adult ed budget. We'll see what that can be pulled together in a week. Is there anything else that the committee would like to see?
If, because I love reading this stuff at night before I go to bed, you know, it's my favorite thing.
Makes for a good night's sleep, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
so if I see something that I'm gonna suggest for cut, can I email that to you?
Sure, you,
Email and then we'll discuss it so that we're prepared. So if you have a question, certainly letting us know in advance, so we have a chance to be prepared for a response one way or the other.
anything else for the next week's? No? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are
Adjourned?
released.
I'm gonna adjourn.
39.
Yes, sir. 6:39. Thank you all for being here.
You only have one, the other staff member, oh.